Hi, I'm Allison Bartlett. Wow, that's loud. Senior Manager of Disability Programs with HDSA. Thank you so much for being in here for the last session of the day, especially since this is all about disability and disability planning, which I know it's a lot now that it's 2:30 in the afternoon. Trust me, I'm also tired. Bear with me, we will get through this together. I'll try to make this as engaging as possible because I know everyone likes to love to ask the research questions. They're here for research and all the stuff that's like moving forward with HD. And I'm like, I'm your friendly neighborhood disability attorney. Let's talk about all the things that are really upsetting today. So I also like to use umbrellas when I talk about disability, because one of the biggest misconceptions when we have this conversation about disability is people think it's just one thing. But how you define disability is any condition which changes how you interact with the world around you. So when you have something like Huntington's disease, a chronic lifelong condition, it's not disability is not just a financial benefit. It changes how you interact with the world around you. It is a way of life. And so I want to kind of unpack this because I don't want people to continue thinking disability is just Social Security, because it is so much more than that. And there's some resources on the table, but one of the things is the disability postcard, and this is a high-level overview of what I do at HDSA and what our disability program helps with. And it's disability benefits, so employer and private disability benefits, Social Security, legal planning, financial planning, health insurance, just all kinds of things that come up in the disability process, which we're going to touch on a lot of these things today. So I have this infographic up here that touches on the complexities in HD. And you can see that it is a lot of different things. And the reason I am so passionate about talking about this, I am so passionate about working with the HD community, is because the HD community manages to fall into all of the gaps that exist in the legal system. And the only way we can change that is if we have these conversations, we can talk more about advanced planning, we make it easier to have these conversations, to ask these questions, and just feel more confident navigating this system. And this comes up a lot, but why do I need to care about disability now? Because really disability planning needs to start when you find out if you are gene positive or you get that official diagnosis from a clinician. Not if you're ready to stop working, but starting to think about these things, because there's so much that goes into it, especially with Social Security benefits and other kinds of legal planning. If you don't act when you have the capacity, if you don't do the preparation and the forward thinking, you can lose out on benefits. You can lose out on Social Security benefits, you can lose out on employer provided benefits. And there's this, we have to talk about capacity. If you lack your capacity, you can't sign any legal documents anymore. So there's a lot of stuff that takes place, and one of the things that is really important for families and everyone to know, if you're creating a power of attorney document, you're not signing your rights or your life away. You're putting into a legal document all of your wishes and who can help enforce them. But you have to do that when you still have the cognitive abilities to do so, the wherewithal, because there's a lot of things that can happen. There's stuff that we can't predict, because as many people have said today, if you know one person with HD, you know one person with HD, and everybody's journey is unique. And so there's no there's no specific process that everybody is going to go through, because that's just not how life works. But understanding the different pieces to build your own version of the puzzle, that's what's really important. This, in an ideal world, this was what the benefit preparation timeline would be. So first, prodromal pre-symptomatic HD, that's the planning stage, where you're researching the financial, legal, and disability options. You're looking at insurance planning. You're starting to put those pieces together. You're just looking what your different options are. And then in the early to mid-stage HD, and I know I'll have to change this phrasing eventually. This is based on kind of the old staging system, but just to give a frame of reference. But early to mid-stage, which is when most people stop working and have to apply for disability, I call this the action stage. So you're obtaining your disability benefits. That's when you can finalize putting the legal documents, your power of attorneys in place, because by the time you or your loved one gets to late stage HD, I want that just to be the benefit stage. I want you to already have those things in place and you're already using those benefits. You're not trying to rush to piece everything together. I don't want anybody to be in that situation. And I know This is not realistic for everybody because just of how life works, because of how HD works. But in an ideal world, I wish everybody would have access to these things, feel comfortable talking to these things. It'd be nice if there weren't so many financial strings tied to all of this stuff so families could take advantage of everything. So some of the things I'm going to touch on today as far as legal and disability considerations, so legal preparation, just a little bit of asset protection, estate planning, power of attorney, and then for disability, health, and other insurance, what those different kinds of insurances are. Because a lot of that is what goes into disability planning. If you are at the point where you need to apply for Social Security disability and you haven't done anything else, you're kind of late to the game, because it means you've probably already missed out on benefits or something else could be missing. So legal planning is so important, and I know Jeff gave a wonderful session just before this, and he is the person you want to talk to really about this stuff in North Carolina. I am not licensed in North Carolina. He knows this stuff way more than I do, but I can help families navigate little pieces, answer questions, point you in the right direction. But with legal planning, without proper legal documents, the impacted person could fall through the gaps in the legal system. And this includes getting in legal trouble, whether it's civil trouble, criminal trouble, bankruptcy, homelessness, not able to afford or access proper care, be denied access to government benefits. And I'll touch on this in a little bit, but one thing that everyone needs to know, Social Security disability benefits retire. Once you have worked for 10 years and paid enough into Social Security, retirement is given. You have to work 10 years over the course of your life, you pay enough into retirement, that stays forever. Social Security disability works on a rolling basis. It works as like any other insurance. Health insurance, car insurance, if you stop paying your premium, you lose access to that policy. Social Security disability works the same way. And unfortunately, I see all too often in the HD community, someone stops working, they either don't know that they have HD, they don't want to get the diagnosis, they just haven't gone to a doctor in years, they stop working, the 5 years passes, maybe they finally get a diagnosis 10 years down the road. So much time has passed, they will never be found disabled for their Huntington's disease. The exception is supplemental security income, but then you have to meet the really strict financial need criteria. For a single adult, you have to have less than $2,000 in assets. For a married couple, you have to have less than $3,000 in assets, because married couples only count as 1.5 people, not 2 people. And that is something, speaking of advocacy, they put legislation into Congress every year to up that minimum, because $2,000 and $3,000 in assets is insane. That number has not changed since like 1986. And we all know a lot of inflation in life has happened since then. And generally with legal planning, the earlier in advance you do it, the more options you have. Jeff gave a really great boat analogy, and he was saying that so many people are like drowning in the water, they have all these different boats to choose, but they take so long picking an option, they end up drowning. Nobody wants that. But if you do the proper planning and at least ask the right questions, because not everybody has to get all of these intense legal documents. It's about what's right for you. But if you don't know some of the words, some of the questions, you're not going to know what to ask for, or just the bare minimum you need that works best for you and your family. And a big thing, and this comes up a lot in terms of Medicaid planning, because with Medicaid, the asset limits are very, very strict, especially in North Carolina. I think it's similar to the SSI asset criteria. So $2,000 for a single person, $3,000 for a married couple. That's practically nothing. And you have to, there's a 5-year look back period. Planning for Medicaid definitely takes time in advanced planning. I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are just different programs that look at assets and have asset limit criteria. So it's just a high-level overview of all of the different things that look at assets and why you might want to do legal planning and asset protection. And a lot of stuff counts as an asset. Cash, bank accounts, savings accounts, land and property. They do not count the home that you live in, but if you have a second home, if you own any additional land, I've worked with families over the years that had, they inherited a random piece of property in a rural area that they never saw, but because they had a home and that additional piece of land, it disqualified them from benefits until they got rid of it. Life insurance policies, and essentially anything that you own that could be sold and turned into cash, but it's a lot. So what are asset protection options that we talk about within HD and just in general? Trusts, revocable and irrevocable. Again, if that's something you want to look into, you really need to work with a specialized attorney in your state. The big difference, though, is a revocable trust, that stays with you. That does not count as an asset protection for government benefit purposes because you still control all of your assets. The only way to have a trust that will be protected from Social Security, from Medicaid, is if you put it in an irrevocable trust. But when you put it in an irrevocable trust, you lose access to it. A trustee takes over on your behalf. And that can be a difficult conversation to have because if you're planning for Medicaid, it means you have to start putting that stuff into that trust that you lose access and control over at least 5 years in advance. And that, I know that can be really hard to grapple with when you're trying to plan for those things. But this is why it's really important to speak with an estate attorney, an elder law attorney, a specialized individual in your state who knows the ins and outs of these things. Because each state, God bless our legal system, each state has their own rules and regulations and everybody does things a little bit differently. I learned some fun facts about North Carolina not too long ago. But that's why it's really important to work with the relevant professionals, and you don't want to just go online. If you find a document online, that's where you can get into all kinds of trouble because they say it's accepted in your state, but there's actually no guarantee. So it's always better to ask a legal professional. I know I'm biased as a legal professional telling everyone right now to speak to other legal professionals. I get it, I hear what I'm saying, but it's because they know best how to navigate you through these things and they can make something that's specific to you. You don't want to get a generalized document and think it's going to cover all of your needs because it's not. And the big one I like to talk about now is ABLE accounts. Because this is a really new, it's not a new program, but this year, as of January 1st, 2026, the age for ABLE accounts, now you have to show you're disabled up until 46. Before, it used to just be 26. So now that's a 20-year age increase. So that means a lot more people in the HD community can take advantage of an ABLE account. So as long as you were found disabled before the age of 26 or 46, and that's a really broad definition. That means just getting a letter from your neurologist. If you have a condition on Social Security's compassionate allowance list, adult onset Huntington's disease is on the compassionate allowance list. That means you qualify for an ABLE account. I think, and every state does it a little bit differently, but you only need $25 to open the account, and a lot of states will match that $25, so you'll start with $50 in your account, and it kind of works like a special needs trust or an irrevocable trust. You can have up to $100,000 in it, and that does not count as an asset for SSI purposes. And then the lifetime maximum is a little bit over $500,000, and that would protect you for Medicaid purposes. And the nice thing about these accounts is they can work like a bank account and a savings account all in one. So if it's something that you could be eligible for, it's worth reaching out to ABLE in North Carolina to get more details. But this is a really great resource for families to take advantage of. And it's significantly cheaper to set up than the special needs trust. And so it's a different option. Okay. This is an important slide because it's about legal decision making. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty of power of attorney documents and guardianship and conservatorship, but what I really want families and individuals to take away is that when you create a power of attorney document for yourself, you maintain the control. You decide what decisions can be made on your behalf. You decide who gets to make those decisions, and you can change that. You can make a hierarchy of people, like your spouse, a sibling, a child. If they can't do it anymore, somebody else can. You can put into the durable power of attorney document, only my neurologist at Duke has the authority to say if I am incapacitated and when somebody can take control full-time. Guardianship / conservatorship, I always say slash because every state calls it something different, and I never know which state does what. But essentially, you have to go to court. You have to submit paperwork in state court showing your loved one no longer has the legal capacity to make decisions or take care of themselves. You have to submit all of the supporting documentations. It's expensive, it can be time consuming, and the reality is sometimes it does kind of destroy families because the person who you're seeking guardianship for, they also get a say in the process. They also can have an attorney trying to fight to make sure you're not trying to get guardianship or conservatorship of them unfairly. And if you're the person who has guardianship or conservatorship that's put on you, you lose decision-making power. And you don't know, like the state could appoint a family member or a loved one who knows you. Sometimes it becomes a state-appointed guardian and they don't know anything about you. And they could just be making the best guess based on the care that you need. And so if you can, and the big thing is, like creating a durable power of attorney with an attorney can maybe be $500 to $1,000, depending if you're doing like the whole estate planning thing versus just a singular document. Guardianship can cost up to $10,000 or more. And it's a lengthy process. If you have a loved one who needs care and no longer has the mental capacity to take care of themselves and there are no documents in place, it could take months or years for all of that stuff to go through the legal system. So if they need emergency care, it's going to drag out that process a lot. And I want everyone in this room to have a say and control in their care. It is your life. I want you to be able to take ownership over it. I don't want somebody to dictate everything for you. I'm talking more than I'm breathing right now because I'm just trying to get through all the information because it's a lot. Okay. Thank you, bear with me. Okay, so one of the big things that comes up as part of legal and financial planning is actually insurance planning. And part of the reason this is such an important conversation because with Huntington's disease, genetic discrimination is legal in this country. Once you have gene testing done, you are not, if you have a positive gene test or you've been formally diagnosed with Huntington's disease, you are not gonna get life insurance. You're not gonna get disability insurance. This happens to me a lot. People bring me water a lot. Okay, I need to work on that. Thank you so much. So under the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, GINA, the only things that are protected are your right to health insurance and your right to employment. No other kind of insurance is protected under that act. So the only thing you are guaranteed is health insurance and your right to work. So if you have a positive gene test or you've been formally diagnosed with Huntington's disease, your ability to get insurance essentially goes away. There are some exceptions. And that's really with employer-provided benefits. I don't know if everyone can see this. It's probably a little bit small. But the biggest difference, so there's public benefits, private benefits, and then employer benefits are a subset of private benefits. Public benefits are Social Security, disability, Medicaid, Medicare. Private benefits are everything else. So disability benefits, health benefits, life insurance, long-term care, hospital, accident, indemnity insurance, all of those things. Aflac, they're a private insurance company. But employer-provided benefits, they pay for the private benefits for all of their employees to access. And that is one of the ways to not get around, but if your company offers life insurance or disability insurance to everyone at the company, then they have to offer it to everyone at the company. They're not gonna ask for your background. They're not gonna ask for your medical records. They're not gonna ask for your medical history. And for most insurances, as long as you are a full-time employee, you're paying into the policy for 12 to 24 months, and you don't take benefits in that time, they will not, even if you already have an HD diagnosis, your HD diagnosis will not preclude you from taking the long-term disability benefit through the employer. The other thing is if you have access to employer-provided benefits, they're significantly cheaper because usually your employer is paying some of that cost. So if you have access to it, please take it. The number of individuals and families I have spoken with over the years who did not take advantage of employer-provided benefits is way higher than you think it is. And so that's something I really want everyone to take away from this. If it's for you, if it's for your kids, if you know someone, a friend, just anybody who's starting their first job and they are asking benefit questions, they should opt into as much as possible. Well, the other thing too is private long-term disability benefits generally are about 60% of your salary. Social Security, no matter how much you get, like the maximum Social Security benefit, whether it's retirement or disability, is maybe $4,300 a month right now. 60% of $160,000 is significantly more than that. So you want also to take these private policies because it's gonna maximize your financial benefits. And it's really important for everyone to know that long-term disability benefits and Social Security don't stack. Most of the time, long-term disability policies say you have to apply for Social Security. So let's say the 60% of your income means you'll be getting, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. It means you'll be getting $6,000 a month, and your Social Security benefit is $3,000 a month. You're not gonna get $9,000 a month. You're still only gonna get the $6,000 a month. The long-term disability company pays half, Social Security pays the other half. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can find a policy that stacks, but you really need to work with a specialized licensed insurance broker to do that, to help you navigate the system. Is one of the things that's really important to know. If you're looking for private insurance on your own, it's always better, especially within the HD community, to work with an insurance broker, because as was explained to me recently by somebody in this room, that life insurance, disability insurance, and long-term care insurance all sit in the same insurance bucket. And if you apply for one of those insurances, let's say at Prudential, and you get denied for whatever reason, every other insurance company across the United States can see that denial. They may not be able to see why you were denied, but they can see that denial, so it's automatically a red flag on your claim. So you want to work with relevant professionals to get benefits and access these things and take advantage of what you have. Yes. So what most policies say is as long as you pay, like there's a wait period essentially, like you can't apply for the policy within that wait period. Or if you, as long as like it's usually 12 months or 24 months, as long as you're paying benefits for that entire time. So let's say you have the HD diagnosis, you switch employers, you start paying into the benefits, you pay into that policy for 5 years. Under most policies, you can take that policy. You can be approved for long-term disability. Because you've met the pre-existing condition criteria, because you applied after. And that's one of the things that does get a little complicated. Everyone, if you have employer-provided benefits, everyone in this room has access to that policy, but most of the time it means you have to talk to your HR department. You're gonna have to ask someone to actually read that policy. They don't usually just hand it out like candy. And it means you also have to understand what you're reading. I read a policy recently, like the first 60 pages were literally just disclosures from states. Yes. Yes, I was wrong. Okay, it's one of those like exceptional things. It's a different kind of life insurance. You can get life insurance, but it's not the same as like when you're looking at whole life insurance policies or term policies. It's a much smaller benefit. So if we wanted to get like $1 million policy on yourself after you've tested positive, that's not gonna happen. But there are other like smaller options to cover like burial expenses or just other things to help you cover costs like towards end of life. But thank you for pointing that out and correcting my mistake. So I get this question a lot. When should I look for benefits myself? Honestly, with your first job, as soon as possible. You know, it's April. And I know most, not all, but like this year, if you're not sure what you have, you know, you can check and look at your open enrollment period through your job. It's one of those things with legal and financial planning, it's sorry, I was thinking like an infomercial just popped into my head from childhood. Set it and forget it. We do not do that with legal, financial, or benefit planning. You have to look at it because things change, circumstances change. I have heard horror stories of someone who set their benefits to a girlfriend or an ex-spouse, never changed them. And so their current spouse, their children, they got nothing because they went to their past spouse. And so it is stuff that you have to look through. And it is good because sometimes your employer policies change. Your benefits may change. They may get a different benefit package. So it is something to pay attention to and to review every year. I'm going to jump back one second. A really big thing, know your disability options. Are you paying into Social Security, or are you paying into a state employment program, or are you paying into a private policy? And I don't know if anyone in this room is like a police officer, a firefighter, or a teacher. This comes up most for state officials or people who work in public education. Because if you are paying into a public education retirement system, in most states you have to pay into that system for 10 years before you're eligible for disability benefits. If you work in North Carolina for 3 years, and then you become a teacher in Louisiana for 4 years, and then you work in Nevada for 5 years, you are not eligible for benefits anywhere if you paid into the public education retirement system individually in each of those states because you moved and you didn't work there enough time. And so it is really important to know that distinction. There are different options. I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, but there are certain, like, it's essentially like paying into like the equivalent of like an IRA or a 401k. There is a different option if you don't think you're going to work in that one state forever, but it is really important to know that. And that was also a really important life lesson I learned as a disability attorney when I was new to this, because I was like, what do you mean your work credits expired? Oh, you were a teacher in Louisiana, so it didn't count. Just a quick difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid can help pay for long-term care facilities. Medicare does not. Medicaid is what requires financial planning. Medicare does not. Some people end up being eligible for both. There's something called Medicare savings plans, and if your income is low enough based on your Social Security disability or your Social Security retirement, you can get both. It's also important to note Medicare does come with a premium. For this year, the monthly premium is $202.90 a month. So if you're on Social Security disability, it's automatically withdrawn from that, and if you're on Social Security retirement, I'm pretty sure it's automatically withdrawn from that. And it's just really good to know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. And if you can have both and they can stack, that's the best of both worlds. But that does not exist for everybody. I wish it did. I wish it did. When people say Medicare for all, really, I wish it was like Medicare plus Medicaid for all. That would cover all the things. Yes? So in order to get Medicare through SSDI, you have to have received 24 qualifying payments. And the reason I say that instead of like a 2-year wait period is because it can be retroactive. Like if you applied for benefits 3 years ago, it took all of this time to get approved, but Social Security agreed that your disability started 3 years ago, they will pay you that back pay, and they will say the Medicare start date started running from 3 years ago, so now your Medicare will start. It's an automatic process. You are automatically enrolled in Medicare Part A and Part B. No. So in order to, I will get to that in a second, but just so everybody knows, you can only get Social Security disability up until full retirement age. Question, what is current full retirement age with Social Security? 67. Whoever said 60, that is right. It is now 67, which adds an extra layer of complication because Medicare still starts at 65, but full disability isn't until 67. So if you're going to get Medicare through disability, you have to be approved through Social Security disability insurance. That is the only way to get Medicare early. Medicaid for most states comes with supplemental security income, which is a separate program. But in order to get early Medicare, you have to be approved for Social Security disability insurance, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Oh, and just so everybody knows, I'll go back to this. Medicare that you get for retirement and Social Security from the government, it's only Part A and Part B. hospitalizations and doctor's visits, if you want dental coverage, if you want visit coverage, if you want drug coverage, you have to pay for additional policies. You have to get Medicare Part D. I am not, as a lawyer, I don't know why, but I know a lot of medical professionals do not like Medicare Advantage plans. You'll need to talk to your friendly local neighborhood medical professional, whether it's your neurologist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, whoever. I just know they do not like them because what happens to a lot of families is it makes Medicare Part D affordable, but you lose things that you may really need. So I don't want anyone to lose coverage for something they may ultimately need in the future. But I just don't know enough about Medicare Advantage plans to know the technicalities of it. I just know you need to ask questions and be wary of them. Okay, Okay, I was mentioning this earlier, but yeah, the difference between employer-funded retirement and disability, it's just good to understand those. North Carolina doesn't, aside from a public education retirement system, there's not like a short-term disability benefit program in North Carolina, so that's not something you'd have to worry about. And if you don't know, this is one of the things you can call me and we can talk through and I can answer questions about, because I do direct consultations with families all the time. I answer questions, we schedule phone calls, connect families with resources. So I don't expect anyone in this room to remember all of this today. This is a starting point. A big takeaway, though, is the intersection of benefits, because there's a lot of things that you can get at once. So Social Security disability insurance is in the middle because most Americans end up paying into Social Security and are eligible for Social Security disability insurance. But you can get state disability at the same time. This is more true for like California, New Jersey. There's just a few states that have state disability. But this is important for getting short-term disability from an employer, long-term disability from employer, or if you have private short-term or long-term disability, an FMLA. So one of the things that confuses people is you can technically still be employed with your company and get Social Security disability at the same time. Because Social Security says there's a difference between being employed, because you can be employed and not doing any work. You can be receiving short-term or long-term disability from your employer. You can be on FMLA. You could be getting paid sick and vacation time. So you're technically employed, but you're not working. That is the distinction. And there are a lot of people who end up being employed with their company throughout the Social Security disability process, because at some point you have to say, okay, I'm not coming back to work. But being approved for long-term disability benefits, getting long-term disability through your employer does not automatically mean you're never coming back to work. At some point you do have to have that conversation if you don't intend to go back to work. One of the things I do think that is important to talk about, and this was a question that didn't get asked in the panel this morning, but like, what is the one thing I would want everyone to know about disability or applying for disability? The disability process starts long before you actually need to apply for Social Security disability. Because for a lot of individuals, it can start with requesting accommodations from your employer, knowing what your legal rights are. So at no point do you ever legally have to disclose your HD status to your employer. You do not need to do that. You would do that if you want to request accommodations. You would do that if you have a good relationship with your employer and you just want to be like, hey, I want touch bases. I want to build safety mechanisms into this. So like if I'm not performing my job well, if there's things that need to change, we can work on that together. But if you don't have an employer you feel comfortable disclosing to, you don't have to. But if you don't disclose, you don't have the legal protections guaranteed under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Your employer cannot be penalized if they do not know you have a disabling condition. And regardless of whether you've disclosed your HD or not, if you get to the point, with or without accommodations, that you can no longer perform your essential job tasks, your job is not protected anymore. And if you think about it, like, do you want a pilot flying if they have progressed HD? Do you want a school bus driver with more progressed or advancing HD to drive around your children? Do you want a dentist? There's just other things. And that's where really there's a difference between a career and your job. And so work accommodations can help protect your career as long as possible, but ultimately there will be a point where anyone with Huntington's disease ultimately has to stop working, or they at least have to stop performing their career And that's when we talk about step-down work or just volunteering or doing something else a few days a week, depending on what your wishes and needs are. And another question I get asked a lot is, when do we apply for disability? And there's no gold standard, because everybody's Huntington's disease looks different. Everybody's job looks different. So if you're starting to have difficulty with like balancing gait, but you work from home and like you are okay cognitively for the most part to perform your job and you work from the safety of your home, then using your balancing gait issues is not going to be enough of a reason for you to stop working. So there's a lot of things that go into it. But really the big warning signs, if you start having issues at work actively performing your job, you can't get there on time. Like, work is just exhausting. Like, what I see a lot, what I've been told a lot, when working with families, is the physical having to just show up for their job, the anxiety of doing their job, fearing making mistakes, and coming home and then just going to bed every night because they are so exhausted. Just the totality of doing those things is too much. They don't have any enjoyment out of life. And so that's when I start asking the questions, is this something you want to keep doing? Is this fulfilling? Is this filling your cup? Or has this become too much? And we can talk about different things, work accommodations, applying for disability, because it does. It looks different for everyone, which is why I always say I'm happy to have this conversation, because again, it's not one size fits all. Having trouble holding a job consistently. I work with people who can get through the job interview, but they can never get out of, the trial work period. That's not what it's called, but that introductory work period. They never get past that because they have a hard time managing. And really, when you really want to, if someone has been out of work a year, I always say it's time to apply. Some people think you have to be out of work a year before you can apply for Social Security disability. That is not the standard. The rule is you have to have a condition that will last 12 months or longer. Huntington's disease meets that criteria, whether you're applying the day after you stop working or 6 months later. Unfortunately, at this time, we know there is not a cure, there's not a medication that slows the progression, so HD always meets that qualification. But one thing that is really important to keep in track of, so Social Security is something called work credits. If we're paying into Social Security, we all earn up to 4 work credits a year. And that's what makes you eligible for retirement. That's what makes you eligible for Social Security disability. In 2026, if you make more, the earnings limit this year is $7,560. If you earn that this year, you've earned all 4 quarters of credit. So that means you could earn all quarters of credit for the year in the first 3 months of the year, depending on your salary. But when it starts to become an issue is if you or your loved one are making less than that amount, then you're not getting all of your credits, and you're starting to bump up when your disability is going to expire. And so that's also a red flag for people. And it's really important to know there are no exceptions for stay-at-home parents. If you took on the amazing responsibility of being a stay-at-home parent and raising your kids, but you have not worked in 10 plus years, you have lost your Social Security disability eligibility, and there is no exception. And that's a really hard one. And we're talking about advocacy. That's one of the things I'd love to change, but that's not a here and now conversation. But it's really important to know that if you are in school or you're a stay-at-home parent and you're not paying into Social Security, you could lose your disability, access to disability. I got to the slide before I got to the slide. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, Social Security disability credits expire. I can't say this enough because I don't want anybody to lose access to this. You paid into the system. You paid into Social Security. You worked. I don't want you to lose out on benefits that you paid into. And again, there's no magical when do I qualify for disability. It really does depend on you. And the thing that makes this difficult, you may qualify for disability under your private policy. It is significantly easier to get disability under a long-term disability benefit policy in most cases because they can define disability as just not being able to do your current job. So you just have to show you can't do your current job. And some say you can't do any job. And that's also what Social Security says, which makes it a really high burden. So not only can you not do your job, you can't do your past work, you can't do any other job in the regional or national economy. So not just North Carolina, not just Virginia, Maine, Florida, California, Alaska, depending on the skill level of your job. As an attorney, I would have to show I can't do anything at my very high skill level or semi-skilled. I'd have to show I can't do unskilled work at a sedentary job. And that's a really high burden. And that's what trips up most families with Huntington's disease. That's what trips up most people applying for Social Security disability. And part of the reason for this is Social Security, because of the nature of what HD is, because we have put this standard that you have to have some kind, like you have to have, in order to get a true clinical diagnosis, you have to have some kind of movement, whether it's saccades in your eyes, chorea, just different things. But Social Security has latched onto that, and they have said you have to have a marked or extreme physical limitation. That is what their standard is for Huntington's disease. They have other, and Social Security has a specific listing for Huntington's disease. It's 11.17, and if you read through it, it becomes apparent why it's so hard for HD families to get approved for Social Security disability based on these rules, because they want you to have a marked physical limitation. In my experience working with the community almost 10 years now, most people stopped working because of cognitive behavioral symptoms and limitations, concentration, attention, memory loss, the things that are part of executive function. And so that really places an undue burden on the community. And it's also really important for everyone to know you cannot get approved for any disability benefit if you don't have medical care. A gene test is not enough. A gene test is not really a medical record, because with Huntington's disease, because it's a genetic condition that's from in your family, you're born with that gene. Social Security and disability providers, they only care about your Huntington's disease once it starts to impact you and your ability to work. And so if you don't have a good medical history, if you don't have medical records to support that you cannot work, what all your limitations are, it's going to be really hard to get approved. I don't expect everyone to read the Social Security Act because, this is fun legal technical language. I just put this up here because Social Security disability is a federal process. If you do not follow all their rules and regulations, your claim will get denied. And a lot of people misunderstand what that process is, which is why I was able to build a disability program in the first place, because so much of this is very difficult to navigate and people don't know where to start. We don't have conversations about this in high school. We don't talk about this as a society. And so what does all of this look like? Big thing, and I'm just gonna go, the big thing between SSDI and SSDI is based on work credits. It's the more stable benefit program. It's the one that's gonna pay you, for most people, a lot more money, and it means if you have children under the age of 18, you could get additional benefits for them. Supplemental Security Income for 2026, the max monthly benefit is only $967 a month. Can anyone in this room live on $967 a month? So just something to think about. This is gonna be the last slide I go through because I'm running out of time, and I know we've already been through so much today. But the big thing with starting the disability process is really, if you can, you wanna prepare in advance. Because if you just go into the Social Security office, sit down to do an online application or call over the phone, and you haven't done advanced planning, you don't know what the application looks like, you don't know what they're gonna ask, you're not gonna be prepared. Because one of the hardest things about the Social Security application is you really, truly have to be brutally honest. And when I say that, you have to talk about either all the things, and really, the person with HD should never be the one completing the Social Security disability application. I'm gonna use a sports analogy. If you had a pitcher with a broken wrist and it was Game 7 of the World Series, would you start that pitcher? So why would you have someone with a progressive degenerative condition that impacts a lot of their cognitive faculties complete a complicated application on their own? And when judgment, insight, awareness, and apathy issues are all very prevalent in HD, don't do it. But what makes this hard is we want to live in the hope. We want to focus on what we and our loved ones, all the good things we can do, all the good things that are happening. The Social Security disability application is really where you have to get into the nitty-gritty of the dark side. You have to get into everything that's changed, what they cannot do anymore, because the person making the decision at Social Security, for most people, is never going to see them. So you really have to paint a picture for Social Security that they will understand. How would you rather submit a stick figure drawing or the Mona Lisa? Most of us won't get to the Mona Lisa. That's okay. But you know what we learned from the Impressionists? It doesn't have to be a clear picture to be a great work of art and to still get the point. And you don't have to navigate any of this alone. We're just gonna skip through this because, again, does anybody have questions? I'm just trying to get to my contact information, and so you have it. I could talk a long time if nobody had figured that out. If you have questions, like this will take you to a resource page, and then that's my contact information. And then on the table out there, there's an application tips for applying for Social Security handout. And another thing that I'm really proud of is a financial and legal preparation checklist. So the first page is financial planning and insurances, just a high-level overview of what to do. And then asset and resource, I can't talk anymore. Asset and resource protection, and then legal decision making. Just a high-level overview of what to be thinking about and just a check mark through your process. But yeah, does anybody have any questions, or did I just break everybody's brain and it's the end of the day and we're all ready to be done? The second one? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sitting through this presentation. And like I said, if you have questions, please never hesitate to reach out to me. I know all of this is a lot.